Compounding may be the most powerful force shaping ordinary life, and most people completely misunderstand it. They assume compounding is a concept that only belongs to wealthy investors managing enormous portfolios. It does not. Compounding is the reason two people with the same salary, the same job, and the same background can live entirely different lives 10 years later. It quietly multiplies money, skill, trust, health, and regret with equal indifference. And if you do not understand how it works, you can spend years doing the right things and still quit right before your life was about to fundamentally change. This is the quiet, exhausting frustration that defines the modern working experience. You wake up at the same time every morning, navigate the same commute, put in a solid 8 or 9 hours, pay your bills on time, and try to save a little when possible. Yet when you sit down at the end of the year and look at your bank account, your career progress, or your overall stress level, nothing seems to have changed. You feel like you are walking on a treadmill, burning an incredible amount of energy while your actual position in life remains completely static. The deeper reason for this feeling has nothing to do with lack of effort. It is that from childhood, every system you interact with teaches you to expect linear progress. 1 hour of homework produces 1 good grade. 1 hour of labor produces $20. 40 hours of work produces 40 hours of wages. 1 unit of effort always equals 1 unit of immediate reward. Because this linear transaction is how daily survival works, people naturally assume that building wealth or changing their life trajectory operates the same way. But it does not. True wealth, whether financial, professional, or personal, operates on an exponential curve that begins with a long, flat, seemingly pointless stretch that Buffett calls the Valley of Disappointment. If you map a compounding curve on paper, it does not look like a staircase going steadily upward. For a very long time, the line hovers just above zero, moving horizontally for months or even years before it finally bends violently upward. This long flat stretch is what destroys ordinary people. Because the modern world has addicted everyone to immediate gratification, surviving this flat line has become the hardest psychological task a person can face. Consider a realistic scenario. A person decides to get their financial life in order, commits to saving $200 every month, and faithfully maintains that discipline for an entire year. 12 months of genuine sacrifice. At the end of the year, they have $2,400. Then reality strikes. A car transmission fails or an unexpected medical bill arrives for $2,000. The check gets written, and suddenly the account is back near zero. In that moment, the Valley of Disappointment whispers a very convincing lie. Saving money is a scam. The system is rigged. Your sacrifices were meaningless. So they quit, go back to paycheck living, completely unaware that the compounding of their behavior was never actually interrupted. The discipline it took to save that money was actively reshaping their identity, building the surface area required to eventually pick up massive results with a single turn. But compounding applies far beyond savings accounts. For working people, the most powerful compounding asset they actually control is their own earning power. Most people treat their careers with the same linear mindset they apply to hourly wages. They show up, do the minimum required to avoid being fired, collect a paycheck, and go home. They stay in the same position for a decade and then complain they are not advancing. But they do not actually have 10 years of compounded experience. They have 1 year of basic experience repeated 10 times. True career compounding happens through what can be called skill stacking. Rather than trying to be the absolute best in one narrow field, which is statistically impossible for most people, career compounding means becoming very good at 3 or 4 complementary skills and letting them multiply each other's value over time. An administrative assistant who spends a year learning data analysis and another year developing presentation skills transforms from a replaceable hourly worker into a replaceable operations manager. Individually, none of these skills require genius, but compounded together over a few years, They create a unique profile that commands a 50% salary increase rather than a standard 3% inflation adjustment. The tragedy is that most people destroy their own professional compounding by constantly resetting their trajectory. They feel bored or frustrated during the flat phase of learning a job, so they hop to a different company for $1 more per hour, liquidating their compounded institutional knowledge and starting over as a beginner. They never stay long enough to transition from the person who is told what to do to the person who is paid for their judgment. And judgment is what the highest paid people in any field actually sell. There is another form of compounding that is entirely invisible yet arguably the most powerful asset a person can possess. That asset is reputation and the trust built with the people around you. Trust compounds identically to money, incredibly slowly in the beginning and then exponentially over time. In the early stages, showing up on time, keeping promises, taking responsibility for mistakes, and refusing to cut corners produces almost no visible reward. 4 years, the return on integrity appears to be nothing but more work. Many people conclude that reliability does not pay the bills and lower their standards, interrupting the compounding of their own reputation just as it was building critical mass. But for those who refuse to interrupt the process, something remarkable happens. An independent contractor who spends 10 years being consistently honest eventually has a 6-month waiting list, charges premium rates, and never spends $1 on advertising. Inside a corporation, the person who delivers reliably for a decade builds a reservoir of trust that acts as a friction reducer for their entire career, drawing opportunities automatically and providing a shield when inevitable mistakes occur. However, compounding is completely amoral. It does not care whether it is building your life up or tearing it down. It will multiply bad habits just as ruthlessly as good ones. Negative compounding is especially dangerous because in the early stages, the consequences are almost entirely invisible. A $2,000 purchase put on a credit card at 25% interest with minimum payments eventually costs $6,000. But negative compounding extends far beyond credit cards. A 30-year-old worker who copes with stress through processed food, no exercise, and 5 hours of sleep per night spends their entire 30s in the flatline phase of negative health compounding, assuming that because no heart attack has arrived, their body is immune to their lifestyle. Then at 50, the curve bends violently upward. The health did not fail overnight. It was 20 years of silent physical debt reaching a margin call. The same destructive math operates in psychology and relationships. A small habit of complaining compounds over a decade into deep cynicism. Friends stop calling. Partners emotionally detach. Employers quietly remove someone from leadership opportunities because their attitude drains the energy of every room they enter. To survive the invisible early stages of positive compounding and avoid the trap of negative compounding requires what can be called an everyday compounding protocol built on 3 rules. The first rule is to change your unit of measurement. Stop measuring progress in days and weeks. Start measuring in years and decades. Checking a retirement account every afternoon or stepping on a scale every morning is intentional. Torturing yourself by zooming in so closely on the curve that all you see is a flat line. The second rule is to never interrupt something that is quietly working. When you have been steadily paying down debt or building a skill, the urge to stop and redirect that money or time towards something more exciting is the single greatest threat to your compounding. Learning to sit on your hands when a system is working is one of the most valuable disciplines a person can develop. The third rule is to focus entirely on trajectory rather than speed. Compounding does not require heroic bursts. It only requires a slightly positive trajectory sustained over a long period. 5 pages of reading per night rather than a book per week. $50 automatically transferred each week rather than trying to invest half of every paycheck. Making the good path easier than the bad path through automatic systems. Keeping healthy food more accessible than junk food. And removing shopping apps from phones. The goal is not to become a machine but to stop asking your tired, stressed future self to make heroic decisions every single night. What looks boring from the outside is often exactly what is building freedom on the inside. A person who compounds small positive actions across money, skills, reputation, and health may not look impressive in any single month, but 5 years later, they occupy a completely different universe.